Bien, pues para hablar de la presentación voy a utilizar un dibujo que...
Well, to use a drawing that Fernando Zamora has lent me, and that can express rather well what we are telling here, both Maria and I. Well, on the one hand, barrel has one function, which is yielding and releasing aromas and tannins, and therefore making a wine more complicated in the sense of aromas, a more round wine. But there is also a transfer of oxygen to the inner part, the interior, so that all this works as a whole, because there is also an exiting of water and ethanol, and this is all complexity. The whole complexity is going to increase the pleasure of drinking wine. So, through different steps, treatment steps, we can give value to something, a wine that a tank or a container that maybe does not have the quality required for the wine inside. Logically, the value of the barrel is not only the active pass to the wine, enriched in aromas and structure, but it has a kind of iconic value, which is part of the brands that are normally accompanying many of the designations of origin that are here in Spain. And therefore, depending this value, not only from the romantic point of view, but at the level of market, although it's not my goal in this presentation, I would like to share with you how some microbiological deterioration processes that can happen in used barrels appear in this line that shows how the score got by different wines by tasters. And there is a lot of volume, a lot of wine here in the Rioja designation of origin, and how these tastings check or detect this content in ethyl phenols and the sensory threshold, and this has a negative correlation. But we wanted to see also what were the prices of these wines in the market, and those having a lower content on ethyphenols have a higher price, which in some cases can even be double the price of those having a high content in ethyphenols. This is not a statistical study or a statistical correlation, but there is a trend. So it is apparently it is easier to sell cleaner wines. So we made a trial on the Tempranillo variety that were growing in French oak, and we compared the wine that had been growing in a regenerated barrel, in a conventional barrel 6 years old, and then a mixed system where these wines started growing in a conventional barrel, and then they went on to a regenerated barrel. We analyzed the volatile component, and according to the results, we can see that certain compounds like euphenol or phosphorydic alcohol and the peptones are rather equivalent here. And therefore, that means that the toasty layer has not been removed with the regeneration treatment, which is good news. If we see the wines in 2012, there is aroma yielding activity here with the trans whiskey lactona and the seringol. In the case of the trans whiskey lactone, we see a lower activity. We are comparing different months. And always all these examples come from real wineries that wanted to know the evolution of their wines. If we compare a new barrel, which is not what should be done, Here we're comparing them with a regenerated barrel in its 8th year and with a bluish barrel. And so we see here, sorry, not bluish, but with sulfate. And in the case of lactones, we see that some compounds still appear in the isolated barrel. And therefore, we can say that not only the toasty quality is maintained, but also the aroma action is enhanced. Here we compare wines, the same wine grown in a tank, and compare it with the regenerated barrel in its 8th year. And we compare after 6 months that many compounds, furfural, 5-methylfurfural, and even the vanillin are still increasing. So we see there is a constant activity here of release of these types of aromas that are part of the game in the growing these wines in barrels, and therefore this aromatic activity is really enhanced. Another trial in Rioja with old barrels, even 12-year-old barrels, we see with the same regeneration and with even 2 regenerations and having the same wine. We see that components such as maltol with this desirable caramel aroma that accompany those wines that are grown in barrels, or spicy compounds like methylfuridic or aldehyde or serine aldehyde that the wood is lending. Together with the trans and cis whiskey lactone, we see that they are increasing accordingly, and sometimes even the most desired aromas that come from vanillin, the lactones increase their value. This is a French example in Bordeaux, where we were comparing again regenerated barrels with conventional barrels maintained in a different way, and comparing them with a new barrel. What we observed is that some aromatic compounds, not so much in lactones, here the barrels were American, but the hydroxymethylfurfural and the vanillin and the serine aldehyde, we see that they are far from the typical values of a new barrel, but they exceed the values of the conventional barrels. And therefore, we have an added value as per the normal treatment of barrels. What happens when adding aromas? Well, those marking more differences with conventional barrels are precisely the addition of lactones and the addition of phenolic acids that are part of the game. Something interesting to emphasize the structure in the mouth is the content in elagic tannins that even exceeds the ones that appear or are in the new barrels, with higher yield of tannins, and therefore there is a higher tannic reactivation in the mouth with toasty flavors. And continuing with Bordeaux, we compared also a 3-year-old barrel and how this regenerative treatment, and we observed that the cis-methyllolactones and this coconut flavor and certain methaldehydes is higher in the regenerated barrel than in the non-regenerated barrel. I find this work very interesting and very curious. It is a work carried out by several laboratories in Spain, were using, through a mathematical algorithm, they are able to distinguish the wines growing in active barrels, the ones that are younger than 6 years, and compare them to those grown in chips. And we see this, or with chips. And well, we only have one client that has bought this analysis. Nobody else was curious enough to know whether wine can be distinguished. Jean-Claude Renaud maybe would be interested. Anyway, because it's true that we didn't made this type of analysis thinking that there would be a high interest on it. But this analysis reveals a very interesting thing. What we are comparing here is the same type of analysis of main components, comparing 5 regenerated barrels, 7 wines in barrels younger than 6 months, 6 wines with chips, and 5 or having a contact with chips, and 5 wines in old barrels but having contact with chips. There is a huge segregation here. We see that this mathematical algorithm, the higher this algorithm, the more chips and less vanilla. And well, the wines with chips and with old barrels and chips are rather positioned as per compared to this value. And the method, the Barena method, is going to go beyond because the regenerated barrels are giving low values, which means a statement or reaffirmation of the fact that the wine has had a contact with an active barrel. If we compare the values obtained, we can say that a 6-year-old or 7-year-old barrel, which has a residual value for activating aromas, we are never going to compare it with a new barrel, but indeed we are going to compare it with already active barrels. And this is due to the progressive increase of vinylene and eugenol, which is especially eugenol, lowers appropriately the value of vinylona, which decreases the algorithm, the mathematical algorithm. In this case, this winery makes malolactic fermentation, and these are treatments that can deteriorate the value of the barrel much faster, and therefore the regeneration is made to verify whether there are certain aromatic compounds that increase as per a conventional barrel. And we see that vanillin, furfural, methylfurfural, and eugenol are revalued with this treatment. I am very, very fast because I have to respect the time for my colleague Maria. And please allow me to be so fast. And here in the Tempranillo variety, this winery wanted to do something different because they were using new barrels, and therefore, according to the Rioja regulation, requires some minimums standards, and this work had to include this contact along 2 years, so 24 months, thinking of reserve wine, and so as not to make wood too present, they were using used but regenerated barrels. What happens in this case? The aromatic concentrations are still increasing, but here it was interesting to assess how the toasty nature did not increase so much. And therefore, there was a kind of buffering of aromas at the final moments of the wine. And I would like to also show this example, which is very interesting because it compares barrels from different age or treatment that are regenerated or isolated, and they are controls, and also compare them with new barrels. And statistically, what we can observe here, if we see the variables in this correlation sector, as per compared to the positioning of the wines. We have removed the controls because we don't want to compare with new barrels. What we see here is that there is indeed a trend of regenerated barrels to get position in positive values represented by typical volatile components of the wood, whereas the controls are lagging behind, and the aroma values are plausible here, are represented here. And as they belong to the same aromatic families after 9 months, what we did here, another interesting thing, because this winery, which is using young barrels, taking advantage of these young woods, and they increase in 25% the volume treated with regenerated barrels. If this treatment is not performed, there are several compounds that can increase their concentration, and therefore the shelf life of the barrels is demonstrated through this analysis. And to conclude with, I would like to say that this treatment or mechanism to regenerate barrels, apart from eliminating this tartrate film that are not visible but can be touched without removing this tartrate layer or film, we can enrich these wines with more wooden-like aromas. And the wines that are enriched in regenerated barrels are therefore able to benefit from this value both in volatile components and tannins and a good structure in the mouth. The session or yield kinetics has been really well proven in the trials. And then the organoleptic properties can be more active, sensorially speaking, and therefore something that has gained a value from the point of view, the hedonistic point of view, and sensorially speaking, the icon, the barrel icon, can improve the final quality of these wines. And well, here I'm going to stop to give the floor to my colleague Maria. Thank you very much.